Good morning, my dear friends. Good morning from KFC in Barragata, Guam. Having my breakfast before I go in. We're waiting for a news conference schedule over in Saipan at the governor's office. We'll try to find out more. But we heard that the governor is going to be talking about the financial problems and maybe some solutions.
You got breakfast?
This is the chicken fried steak. And I asked him to make her mashed potatoes. It was so good. So yesterday we put out a story because we got a copy of the finance transition report over in the CNMI government. And long story short, they are, Ralph Torres, the predecessor, he accumulated more than $314 million in deficit. That's exponentially more than the amount of money, the revenue available for appropriation on an annual basis there. Just last year, in fiscal year 21, the administration raked in yet another $30-some million deficit. And as late as December 27 of last year, the transition team found that ARPA funds are in deficit of some $80+ million. There's no more ARPA funds left. And the general fund is in deficit. And the reason that's a big problem is because for personnel costs in the executive branch, 80% of those costs were to be borne by the general fund and 20% by ARPA funds. And since there's no more ARPA funds, the governor now has to figure out how he's going to pay the remaining 20% of personnel. And if you look at the Department of Finance alone, the number of employees they have, some 400-some employees, some 280-some of those employees are paid for with federal funds, with the ARPA funds that no longer exist. So what's going to happen to those employees? I don't know. The other question is, where are those employees? When were they hired? And at what salaries? And we know from the boost hearings and from other news that has happened since the hiring of people from Guam into the Commonwealth government or to help with the Torres Saipan campaign, etc., and the number of contracts that went to Guam businesses during the pandemic era over in the CNMI, we know that there have been corrupt crony forces from Guam who have helped to place the CNMI government in the position that it is in now. And it's sad and it's embarrassing for a Guamanian like me and many others. But you had these people who saw money, they saw dollar signs, they saw an administration, a previous administration, that all you had to do was be in with them in order for you to get that contract or get that job or be able to, administer funds, federal funds at that, and including local funds. And they just took. The greed just... And so there was great hope at the inauguration of Governor Palacios. And we were there on Inauguration Day, and we attended many of the festivities. Let me tell you a story of what happened. So right after the inauguration, which was at the Pedro Tenorio Multipurpose Center in Susupi, we went across the street to the luncheon that was hosted for dignitaries. And we were happy to have been invited to that. Thank you to the Palacios Apatang Transition Committee and administration for including us in these festivities. So we walked over to the World Resort for the luncheon. And I saw lots of people from Guam. And I thought, okay, it's nice that they're hosting, the senators and the mayors and the governor and the first gentleman who came from Guam to help celebrate these festivities. But then I saw a lot of business people too. And some of them, I'm not going to say their names, but some of them I thought, all right, they have businesses here in the CNMI, or they probably know a thing or two that can help out, with some of the problems that are going on here. You got some smart financial people, etc., etc., and good people like Simon Sanchez, who's on the Consolidated Commission on Utilities. He's a local businessman here on Guam. Glenn Leon Guerrero, who's a businessman and a pastor here on Guam. Both of them classmates of Governor Palacios from the class of 74 at FB. And there are others who, you could see that they had good intentions for being there for the governor. But then there were others, and I thought in my head, I'm like, oh man, come on, Guam. Don't do this. Don't be here because you see an opportunity. Don't be here because it's a change of administration and you need to be in good with them, and because you're going to apply for that next contract, or you're going to ask for something, you're going to see opportunity, but all it really is cronyism and corruption. Because there are people from Guam who have done enough to harm the CNMI already. We don't need it anymore. And I'm heartened that Governor Palacios, Lieutenant Governor Apatang, their administration, and the Commonwealth Legislature are watching out for stuff like this. There are now more focused eyes on things like this, because not only is there a commitment against corruption and cronyism by the new government, but there isn't any money to allow it to flourish, if not at the expense of the people. Because this is what's going to happen over this year. This is just me talking out loud, looking at that finance report and wondering how in the world is Governor Palacios going to, how is the government going to survive? What's he going to do? This poor guy has to figure something out because he has very few options. So if the Commonwealth government doesn't raise taxes, make some drastic cuts, and float a revenue bond, I do not know how it is going to survive through September 30th this year, and then pass that into the next fiscal year. Unless there's a gigantic rebound in tourism that happens soon, there has got to be fiscal health restored to the Commonwealth government based on that report that the finance transition team gave. And it's going to hurt. The only way it's not going to hurt in the short term is if creditors allow the CNMI government to float a big revenue bond. But even at that, the creditors will want to know that the CNMI government is serious about its commitment to creditors by making other tough decisions. They'll want to know that the CNMI government is able to cut and able to enhance revenues through tax or fee increases. This is not going to be a pleasant time for the people of the CNMI. But the stability of government finances is kind of a starting point for a lot of things, including economic development and investor relations. And so it is my sincere hope that those companies from Guam who really do have something to offer in the way of helping the CNMI government to pull through this, that they're able to provide their expertise, but that those companies from Guam that are just looking to make a quick buck, please stop, stand back. That era is supposed to be over. There was an entire election, in a landslide election, in both the legislature and the administration, where the people said, we're done with that. Stop that. Help Governor Palacios and the new legislature to navigate these very murky waters, because the Commonwealth government, it's broke. There's probably going to be more about that today. But that's all I wanted to say as I was having my breakfast, and thank you guys so much for joining me this morning. I appreciate it. Good morning from KFC in Barragata. I'll see you guys soon.